over $4 million in tokens. They say, quote, Mr. Beast's fund was an early investor in our pre-sale. He had the same unlock schedule as everyone else. Were we happy with the way he sold? Definitely not. But legally, there was nothing we could have done. And then, just like with Super, they claim they didn't ask for a promotion of the project, but that Mr. Beast decided to comment once himself anyways. On March 9th, 2021, Mr. Beast responds to Eternity Chain saying, this one will be hype. It's worth noting, once again, about 24 hours before saying this fund wallet purchased over $100,000 of earn tokens in addition to the presale. Now, what is
Hello and welcome to the
is
stream.
that Mr. Beast's name was put publicly on the Eternity Chain website. On their investors and partners page, you might be asking, well, which is it? Is he an investor or a partner? And the answer is both. He got into the presale, and the Earn team also claims that he partnered with them for an NFT drop. Supposedly, it was a charity drop and a normal NFT drop. Now, the charity drop specifically did happen in association with one of Mr. Beast's projects, Team Seas, saying, quote, all proceeds will go towards cleaning up the seas around the world. This was early November 2021. Then the official
Hello.
on November 3rd, 2021, quote, what an awesome crypto collaboration in support of the team. Then the CEO of Eternity Chain, Nick Rose, confirms in Telegram that the drop is supported by Mr. Beast, saying Earn and ETH tokens will be accepted for the charity auction, which was slated to last 2 months. Now, the reason I'm sharing all of this is because 1 month into this 2-month charity auction on November 30th, 2021, the Rocket Fund or Beast Fund or whatever you want to call it starts selling huge amounts of this Earn token. Allegedly, they sold over $2 million, while the charity itself was still going on. Now, I know that sounds horrible. It looks horrible. It is horrible. Although I have to tell you, personally, I don't think this was a master plan to pump a coin with a charity auction. If it was the plan, it was a bad one because the NFT
Hello and welcome to the stream.
a flop. But do I also think it doesn't matter because regardless of your intentions, selling tokens within a month of your 2-month charity auction is wrong, stupid, and unethical? Yes, I think that as well. Because in case you forgot, Mr. Beast is the charity guy whose name is on the website. It isn't a fund. It isn't a crypto rocket fund. It's Mr. Beast's branding. I even asked the Earn team about this, saying, quote, why did y'all list Mr. Beast instead of Rocket Fund in your partners' investors? Was that discussed? They say, quote, we listed him, Mr. Beast, as a partner and, quote, yes, they accepted that. So according to the Earn team, Mr. Beast
Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. Get ready with me as I do my makeup before we go to church. Church. Generally, church during the weekdays is for Lucas, so it's awesome. Happy to see you all. honest, I don't know how to do that. Have to be another day. Cool. So old. It's hilarious. Wait, okay, now we're branding. Okay, whatever. We're just gonna do it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to like look at that later. Okay. There we go. Let's see. Oh, you know what? With my current setup, I could use my webcam. Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I love it. It's just the right amount of creepy that I love it. It's like the right amount of like, that's fucking weird. It's fine. Oops. come on. Why? Oh, because this is like the webcam itself. That's why. Spotify. So be this one. Now let's see. Do you have? Okay, good. You do have out input. Perfect. I need more. It's like I never have enough. It's not the right pen. That means I gotta get more. I gotta get more. Welcome to the stream. I don't know why I said it in that way. I just felt like it. Let's see. Oh yeah, I was gonna do that. Okay, let's finish our makeup. I really need to like name these like ADHD streams because I was supposed to do work. And I wound up doing my makeup for like 15 minutes. It's like I'm a completely different person. Whew. Actually, I want that brush. There we go. Sometimes in a pinch, just use eyeshadow. Ah! This is when it's drying up, so you're really gonna buy. You gotta buy new makeup. Yeah. Oh, I gotta finish that editing of my thank you video. Look how pretty it is. Thank you to my sister. Ooh. Wow. Oh my goodness. That was like really trippy. Sorry. Okay, since I couldn't find a working eyeliner, I'm gonna do a little dab of the concealer, a little bit of the brown. I would have preferred black, but brown is actually softer, and a little teensy weensy itty bitty with a wash. Let's start with okay. Since we're here, maybe the light pink would be nice. Nothing too extravagant. So the color on the other side. I don't know how to make it stop. Okay. finish it up after I do. Here it is. The brown. The brown eyeshadow. See, very gentle, not too much. Yeah. I used to collect so much makeup, not actually use any. Now I understand why boys do that with video games. Because I've been also that person who collects video games. Okay, so I have a few. I need to do like scheduled streams, like once a week, probably Saturday. I try to do them Sundays, but I really need to just like relax on those days. You know, work a little, focus on going to church and not too much on the live streaming. So we're gonna do them on Saturdays. Canva. Hey, if you're here, thank you for being here, and feel free to say hi below. Otherwise, I'm here. We're back down to one screen because my other screen got destroyed at some point in moving, so cannot have that. Let's see, calendar. Let's do it not as a week, but as a day. I need to take this one off. And do the other one. There we go. You guys are just watching me like feel like stressed. Hold on. Are you doing this to me? Please. Okay. Actually, I can just do this. And then turn this one off, turn this one on. Make it YouTube. Make it make sense. Okay, let's see. Um, let's watch the news.
Beautiful bastards. Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. You daily dive into the news. We have so much to talk about today. Domestic and international, big, small, political, social. But let's start with some internet controversy news. This has really started blowing up more and more. So let's talk about Ethan Klein and Hassan Piker. They're both big creators in the streaming and podcast space. They're former co-hosts. But, with this specific situation, it starts and is mainly focused on Ethan Klein, who's facing backlash again. And this time, it was over a game that he played on his podcast yesterday.
Today, my friends, we are going to play the exciting game here. You at home, play along. We're going to play, is it Twitch or is it a terrorist? Let's take a look here, guys. Start.
There's more to the game, but even just that part right there alone, that faced tons of backlash. With a number of people think that it was wrong that the opening image was a side-by-side of Hassan Piker and Osama bin Laden. And in fact, at a later point in the game, you had someone from H3's team, AB, even calling that out.
I don't know who made this, but yeah, I'm not a fan of the Hassan and Osama on the front page. They need
at least if they're going to compare them, I'll guess.
And so with all this, it appears that they were playing a game from a website called Twitch or Terrorist.com. And to play, you had to read quotes and guess if a Twitch streamer or a terrorist said it. And they all ended up being Twitch streamer quotes, mostly from other creators by the name of like Sneeko and Myron, who've been heavily criticized for anti-Semitism in the past for posts like these, which made its way into the game. Though it also included one post each from Hassan and Frogan, who's another creator Ethan's called out and feuded with in the past. But again, most ended up being from creators Sneeko and Myron, so he ended up closing the game by saying,
"You're right, though, that game sucks."
It was just not enough variety. It didn't prove anything because all the anti-Semites was just like Myron and Sneeko.
And so all that happens, but then once the clips of Ethan playing the game make their way to Twitter, there was backlash everywhere. With a number of people saying things like Ethan Klein comparing a Muslim anti-war content creator to Osama bin Laden. He got other Muslim and Jewish content creators banned for calling Sabra hummus the lowest tier commercial hummus because a lot of Israelis eat it. What the actual hell? As well as Islamophobia on full display. And if Ethan Klein actually cared about anti-Semitism instead of merely feeling disrespected, he would consider what it means to represent Jewish people by being a non-stop whiny bigot. He even had some tagging YouTube social accounts to say that they're platforming racism and hate.
Well,
Hassan Piker himself.
That's not good. You should never move with that foot forward of being
responding, saying, "My former podcast co-host misunderstood me when I said in America that anti-Semitism is institutionally unacceptable, but Islamophobia is permitted if not encouraged. Yesterday, he proved my point." While it received a lot of support, you also had some people responding to Hassan by defending Ethan and the game and accusing critics of misrepresenting it. But again, there was also a fair share of people echoing what Hassan said, with some also noting that this came after Ethan went on his Instagram stories to call out Hassan and accuse him of only pretending to care about anti-Semitism. And Ethan ended up responding to all this backlash himself, writing, "Question, why is Hassan in a game called Twitch a terrorist? Answer, because he is accused of supporting terrorism. That is the beginning and end of this analysis." Arguing that there were plenty of quotes on the site that came from non-Muslims and that he didn't even make the site himself, only played the game on it for a few minutes. And then also saying Hassan's post about the situation was misleading and saying Hassan was accusing him of being Islamophobic for things he didn't even do. With all that said, I do have to pass the question off to you, though. I do want to segment this. Like, for the more general audience, I'd love to know your thoughts here specifically, right? Because this is just one chapter in a much larger saga of Fallout. But then also separately, for people that are a part of either of these communities, right? The H3 community, the Hassan Piker community, there was some overlap for a while. I don't know how much exists now. What's your take on this whole situation, including where we are right now? And then The Onion just bought InfoWars. Because like we talked about yesterday, Alex Jones's InfoWars was up for auction yesterday. And all we really knew is that it was going to play out one of two ways. Either someone pro Alex Jones was going to buy it so he could keep the platform, or someone was going to buy it and shut it down. And so The Onion, definitely not in the pro Alex Jones column, with many understanding the core seriousness of the situation, but saying this is probably the funniest possible outcome. And this is Ben Collins, the CEO of The Onion's parent company, told the New York Times that the outlet plans to reintroduce InfoWars next year as a parody of itself that mocks weird internet personalities like Jones. And so with that, we saw about an hour and a half after the sale was announced, the InfoWars website was shut down. Now with that, right now we do not know how much they paid, but in a satirical press release on the news, they said that it was a steep bargain of less than $1 trillion. And that release also saying InfoWars has distinguished itself as an invaluable tool for brainwashing and controlling the masses. With a shrewd mix of delusional paranoia and dubious anti-aging nutrition hacks, they strive to make life both scarier and longer for everyone, a commendable goal. And adding, through it all, InfoWars has shown an unswerving commitment to manufacturing anger and radicalizing the most vulnerable members of society. And all of this is, one, The Onion's bid was actually sanctioned by Sandy Hook families, and two, Everytown for Gun Safety will advertise on the relaunched version of InfoWars. With an attorney for the Sandy Hook families saying in a statement, "By divesting Jones of InfoWars' assets, the families and the team at The Onion have done a public service and will meaningfully hinder Jones's ability to do more harm." Though I will say, with that, like I talked about yesterday, right, while Jones no longer has InfoWars technically, he's just going to land somewhere else. You can't disconnect him from his audience. If anything, among his audience, this galvanizes just more support and possible money in the future. But that's not going to be news to the people involved. As Ben Collins told the AP, "We thought it would be a very funny joke if we bought this thing, probably one of the better jokes we've ever told. Because by the end of the day, it was us or Alex Jones who could either continue this website unabated, basically unpunished for what he's done to these families over the years, or we could make a dumb, stupid website, and we decided to do the second thing." And while right now, a Jones-affiliated company has been named as a backup bid if The Onion ends up falling through, and they're apparently seeking a meeting to discuss this, right now it does appear that this thing's going into The Onion's hands moving forward. And then, women don't support other women. That is what Sydney Sweeney just said in an interview with Vanity Fair yesterday, and it's gotten some traction, we'll call it. Because she's featured in the outlet's Hollywood issue, and she was asked about how a producer previously disparaged her career, her talent, her looks, and how other actresses have called out this pattern of knocking women down at their peak. And to all that, Sydney said, "It is very disheartening to see women tear other women down, especially when women who are successful in other avenues of their industry see younger talent working really hard." Ooh, I'm gonna stop right there for a second. That's where you can tell this actually bothers her. Like, in a very nice way, she was like, "These dusty old bitches need to mind their mouths. These coffin dodgers better check themselves." But I'll stop instigating. I'll finish the quote. Right? Especially when women who are successful in other avenues of their industry see younger talent working really hard, hoping to achieve whatever dreams that they may have, and then trying to bash and discredit any work that they've done. This entire industry,
Amit
all people
does
say is
that.
women empowering other women. None of it's happening. All of it is fake and a front for all the other shit that they say behind everyone's back. But they're then pointing to these notions that women were raised to see room for only one woman at the top of whatever mountain they were trying to climb, and adding, it's a generational problem. So then all the others feel like they have to fight each other or take that one woman down instead of being like, let's all lift each other up. I'm still trying to figure it out. And what we ended up seeing was that her comments there, they got some mixed reaction. Some thinking that it was too anti-woman, others thinking that she was brave to call out this issue and the hypocrisy. This whole situation, it's interesting interesting in two different regards. One, specifically regarding Sydney's case, right? Because she's an actress, but she's also a producer. I mean, I don't know. As far as people that are out there, she just seems to overtly be hustling her ass off. But then two, this is not a new conversation that's been happening. Granted,
No.
a lot of the conversation ends up being like the numbers of like how many women are in positions behind the camera, including producers. More connected to this specific story, and I think it ends up being kind of a more interesting thing, are women in the industry with each other. I mean, even going back to, like 2017, I remember Anne Hathaway talking about her quote unquote internal misogyny. At the time, sharing her shame over, not trusting female directors, saying it's something that I've thought a lot about in terms of when I get scripts to be directed by women. When I get a script, when I see a first film directed by a woman, I have in the past focused on what was wrong with it. And when I see a first film directed by a man, I focus on what's right with it. I focus on where we could go with the next one, and I focus on where she failed to go. And this, as we've sometimes seen on those like actress or director roundtables, people talking about the importance of the people that have established themselves, especially women, opening the door for other women to fill those roles.
I don't like that. Okay.
Especially, I will say, from the ladies that watch the show. Do you see or do you not see examples of this in your specific world, right? Whatever your job or your life may be. Then,
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to say something controversial. I hope you can look at me the same way after I'm done saying this. Insurance fraud is bad. I know. American hero. But if you could win some points by doing it at least in an interesting way, this would get some points. Because if you haven't seen the news, 4 people in Los Angeles have now been arrested for dressing up like a bear.
Yes, those dumbasses. They really thought that.
According to officials and video.
Okay. I read about this earlier. Hold on. Okay. I read about this earlier about the people who are, one of them dressed up like as a giant ass bear, trying to say that this luxury car was attacked by a bear. And then when they were asked to send information, they sent this ratchet security camera footage of a bear tearing up this car. And when you see the pictures, it's like, sir, ma'am, who came up with this idea? Because they must have thought that people were like that stupid that they were not gonna realize it's not a bear.
And pictures, these people got a bear costume, used hand tools to simulate claws, and then climbed inside of a 2010 Rolls Royce and left scratches all over the interior. And when they submitted their claim, they also submitted surveillance video showing the bear climbing into the car and rooting around. Which, just really quick, sounds like a great idea on paper, but just watching, it looks like someone in a Snuggie just crawling around a car. And so I guess not so surprisingly, the insurance
This is
company
not
started
good.
smelling something fishy. And then an investigation got open, which the California Department of Insurance called Operation Bear Claw, which honestly, just props for that name. But then also during that investigation,
Props to that name.
other claims to 2 different insurance companies, also claiming that a bear messed up their cars on the same day at the same place. And in those cases, it was a 2015 and 2022 Mercedes, and they also submitted video. So when investigators took a closer look at the video, they determined that is definitely a person in a bear suit, which was also then backed up by a biologist from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then when a search warrant was executed, investigators found the bear suit and fake claws. But here's the thing, while all 4 people have now been arrested and charged with conspiracy and insurance fraud, at the time of the arrest, the insurance companies had already paid out some of the claims totaling over $140,000. So I guess
that's on them. So
points for, the scheme briefly working. But unfortunately for them, the point system that I'm talking about is not real. You're probably gonna go to prison, right? Each of these people is facing up to 5 years in prison, and they don't really exchange the points there. So 1, while I was briefly entertained by this story, don't commit fraud. Fraud is bad. And 2, don't be stupid. Stupid? You thought the mega companies whose whole business model is take money from you and try not to give you money back wasn't gonna double check some shit, maybe? I'm just saying. But then, taking a quick break from the news, it is that time of year again when we're all looking for great gift ideas that keep our loved ones,
Okay.
with us. Well, look no further thanks to our longtime sponsor, the PDS, and my go-to for gift shopping, Ridge. Because now is the time, whether you're
excuse
taking
me.
yourself
Okay.
or anyone else, to take advantage of Ridge's holiday sale. I'm talking up to 47% off some of your favorite and stylish products from Ridge. But then, let's talk about it. Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. That is what Donald Trump put forward just as yesterday's show was getting finished up. And so as I promised, we're going to dive in. Because this was an absolute bombshell of an announcement, just objectively, right? People on both sides of the aisle were completely stunned. With this selection being described as easily the most controversial of all of Trump's picks thus far. Though,
Why?
I would stress,
Why though?
So far. Every hour
So far.
up onto the internet, I'm like, did he nominate
Why?
Godzilla to head housing and urban development? Oh, wow,
Yes.
he nominated Thanos was for Secretary
Here's the thing, because I know he knows the power of being just a little taboo. It's what gets it out there. It's basically what got Jack Doherty super famous. But he's doing what the Democrats said that they were gonna do, which is dismantle. He's saying that he's dismantling the government from the inside out. And you know what? Do it. I'm like, do it. It sounds like a lot of exciting changes are gonna be coming up soon, and I recommend everyone getting an IUD before they um go before he goes in the office, if you're worried about like the rights to your um uterus, because clearly they would rather see women die than fix it legally. Anyway, hooray for random crazy ass choosing people to be in positions of leadership, even though you don't know if they're gonna be good at it or not. We're just gonna go with it. We're just gonna go with it, and it's just gonna happen. Woohoo! Oh no, not that one. Go back there. What's this one? There we go. Yeah, that's better. I was like, why is my hand going behind the TV and the dresser? It should not be doing that. It should not be doing that.
Secretary of Health and Human Services. But where I'll start with this Gates situation is just, first of all, the person selected to lead the Department of Justice is usually just way more senior and well-versed in the law. And the same was true for Trump's past appointees, right? Jeff Sessions had a deep background in administrative law, serving as a U.S. attorney for Alabama and as the state's attorney general. Also, Bill Barr had literally already been the AG under Bush Sr. And while he was the same age as Gates when he was selected for his first term, at that point, he had already had an extensive law career and held numerous posts in the DOJ. But Gates, his actual only law experience is working in a firm for a few years before being elected to the Florida House of Representatives and then Congress. But then also beyond that, right, Gates has been, this is even putting it lightly, has been an incredibly controversial figure even among his own party. Right, for years, he was under investigation by the same agency he's now been tapped to lead based on suspicion of child sex trafficking. Right, with that investigation focused on his alleged involvement with a 17-year-old girl, whether he paid her for sex and whether he had paid women to travel across state lines for sex. And while the DOJ eventually closed its investigation without bringing any charges, the House Ethics Committee opened its own inquiry into the matter. And that's in addition to accusations of illegal drug use and accepting improper gifts. But very notably there, Gates has now thrown a wrench into that investigation because he immediately resigned from Congress after Trump announced him as the pick for Attorney General. A move that's been seen as super significant as well as unusual, right? Because normally sitting officials wait to resign from their current post until after they're confirmed for their new appointment, which usually makes sense because if your nomination gets blocked, boom, you still have a job. But for Gates, you have people saying the reasons to resign now, they're more compelling, with people pointing out that ethics investigations typically end when the member being investigated leaves Congress, so he has effectively shut down the House's probe. And the timing of all this really could not have been better, right? According to reports, his resignation comes literally just 2 days before the House panel was set to vote on whether to release their report into Gates. And right now, it remains unclear if that report will even be released. And one of the committee's leaders saying they won't rush to get the report out. But then also, Gates' resignation, it has another impact here, right? Because yesterday, as expected, Republicans officially won the House, reaching the 218 threshold needed to take the majority. But that 218 figure includes Gates' seat, which he is now giving up. So technically speaking, at least for now, they haven't actually won the House yet. But, and I cannot emphasize this enough, I'm saying technically because one, they're expected to pick up more than one additional seat from the 8 races that remain uncalled. And 2, while it will take a minute to fill Gates' seat, his district is one of the most Republican in the country, right? So there's no possibility that one's going to get flipped. And then actually 3, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has already conceded that his party doesn't have the numbers to take the House. But going back to the main story at hand, right? The various investigations into Gates, they're also not the only controversies that he's faced. But he's also been accused of showing photos of naked women to colleagues on the House floor and preemptively seeking a pardon from Trump before the DOJ's sex trafficking investigation ended, though notably he has denied
Excuse me?
various claims. He's also falsely claimed that Antifa was behind January 6th, but then also defended the actions of Trump's supporters that day. And then there's more. I'm not going to touch on everything. I don't want to get stuck in the weeds, but it's also been widely reported that Gates is disliked by many of his Republican colleagues, and his inflammatory approach to politics has actively made him many enemies within his own party, especially after he led the charge to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker last year. But, with all this, like we've seen with many of the other nominees that Trump has picked, the main thing that seems to matter is loyalty, right? And specifically loyalty to Trump, especially because Attorney General is one of the single most most high-profile appointments in any cabinet. And Gates, I mean, he has loyalty in spades. He has always had unwavering fealty for Trump, acting as one of his most fervent supporters and champions in the House. Right, and one of the ways that's been on display is that he's echoed many of Trump's complaints about the DOJ being weaponized as a political tool against Trump. And in fact, along with repeatedly calling for defunding or abolishing the FBI, which is part of the DOJ, at least once he called for the DOJ itself to be abolished. But then some and or all of that combining into, Gates's confirmation not being an assured thing. Though also understand I say that, as I mentioned yesterday, and I will continue to say, we are in a time of anything is possible, good or bad. But why this might not work out for him is that numerous Republicans have already spoken out against his appointment. That including some who are on the outs of Trump, like Trump's former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who called him the worst nomination for a cabinet position in American history. And many Republican officials, strategists, and even Trump advisors have said they don't think he can get enough votes to be confirmed by the Senate. Right? And this, as his confirmation, will require either a simple majority or 50 of the 53 Republican senators plus the tie-breaking vote of the vice president. Though it's unclear right now if he could get that. Right? Key Republican senators have raised question. Or we're seeing folks like Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski saying Gates is not a serious candidate, and then saying, if I wanted to make a joke, maybe I would say now I'm waiting for George Santos to be named. Meanwhile, others have spoken less definitively, like Senator Susan Collins, who said that she was shocked by the selection. Also, Senator Joni Ernst saying Gates has got his work really cut out for him to get confirmed. And so ultimately what we're going to see play out here is like one of the biggest loyalty tests regarding the Republican-led Senate. And actually, to that point, Gates isn't the only appointment that'll test those limits. Well, obviously, each person in each position is going to be different. The same goes for Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host who Trump tapped to lead the Pentagon. With the people who were concerned there saying he just doesn't have the experience to lead the department. You also have people out there who have serious concerns about Tulsi Gabbard, with Trump announcing yesterday that he picked her as the director of national intelligence. Not because critics say she has zero direct experience in intelligence, but also due to the fact that many believe she is sympathetic to Putin. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as the rest of the Republicans, do here. Right? Especially because, as we mentioned yesterday, if the Senate blocks any of Trump's nominations, it appears that he might try to get them through unilaterally. Because technically, the president can appoint his own nominees without approval when the Senate is in recess. And Trump has made it very clear that he expects the new Majority Leader to allow him to make recess appointments. But for some, it seems like Gates might already be losing the title of most controversial appointment so far, because as I was finishing up today's show, Donald Trump has officially announced that he's tapped RFK Jr. for Secretary of Health and Human Services. So
Oh no! What?
There still may be another spot for you. Then, taking a quick break from the news, there's more than just winter.
Something about that just doesn't sound right. But I'm just gonna move on from it and not think about it.
Comfort from the outside in. But then, is it political retribution or an investigation into a violated agreement? That is a very public debate we're seeing play out right now, because early yesterday morning, the FBI raided the home of Shane Copland, founder and CEO of Polymarket, which for those who don't know, Polymarket is the world's largest prediction market where you can make bets on future events using crypto. And in fact, and very notably, Polymarket exploded in popularity during the election because it placed Trump's odds of winning far and above Harris's, despite the polls having neck and neck at the time. People were betting on the election. But despite the American election getting Polymarket so much damn attention, technically Americans aren't allowed to use the site. Because you see, back in 2022, Polymarket made an agreement with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission saying that they would prevent any US-based trader from making any transactions on their platform. And that agreement only came after they paid $1.4 million to settle charges saying that they had failed to register with the commission. But then with that, Bloomberg says that's exactly what landed them in hot water again, reporting that they are under investigation by the Justice Department for accepting trades from US-based users. And so with that, reportedly federal agents showed up at Copland's apartment in New York City at 6 a.m. yesterday, demanding his phone and other electronics. And this is reportedly who wasn't given a reason for the raid, but he did respond by posting on X, "New phone, who dis," and adding, "It's discouraging that the current administration would seek a last-ditch effort to go after companies they deem to be associated with political opponents. We are deeply committed to being nonpartisan, and today is no different. But the incumbent should do some self-reflecting and recognize that taking a more pro-business, pro-startup approach, that may be what would have changed their fate this election." And this is Polymarket. The company also called the investigation, quote, "obvious political retribution by the outgoing administration," and added, "Polymarket is a fully transparent prediction market that helps everyday people better understand the events that matter most to them, including elections." But we're going to have to wait to see what comes from that, especially because the Justice Department is going to be making some changes soon. And some changes, probably putting it very lightly. But then, in international news, it is being reported that Israel is preparing a ceasefire plan for Lebanon as a congratulatory gift to Donald Trump. This, according to the Washington Post, who claimed that a close aide to Israeli PM Bibi Netanyahu spoke to Trump and Jared Kushner this week and told them that Israel is rushing to advance a deal in order to deliver an early foreign policy win for the president-elect. Though, right, that said, an Israeli military official said that plans were also being created to ramp up ground operations in Lebanon if talks ultimately fall apart. But as far as the deal that may soon be on the table, Israel would reportedly demand that Hezbollah fighters retreat beyond the Litani River, right, which is the northern edge of a UN-monitored buffer zone established in 2006. And that because, notably, since October of 2023, Hezbollah has been using that area as a staging ground for launching rockets and missiles into Israel. Attacks that have killed 45 civilians and 31 soldiers, as well as forcing around 60,000 people from their homes. And then on the flip side, Israel's military campaign has reportedly killed several thousand and displaced nearly 1 million people. Right? And as far as the death toll, we don't have solid data distinguishing between civilians and combatants, but it's believed that hundreds of women, children, and first responders are among the dead. You know, today, while we're talking about a potential ceasefire, it's also important to note that the violence is not stopping right now. Just yesterday, for example, 6 Israeli soldiers were killed in combat in southern Lebanon. And today, Israeli forces are actually moving deeper into the country, with airstrikes in Beirut's southern suburbs also killing at least 6. So with that, some believe there's a chance that Hezbollah has been weakened enough to take the deal. And in fact, a senior Lebanese official is saying that the group is ready to retreat from the buffer zone. The only issue is that Israel wants the right to intervene itself to enforce any ceasefire if it deems it necessary. And that is something that Hezbollah and Lebanon are likely not to sign off on. But either way, right, all of this is another sign of how U.S.-Israel relations may be changing now. With the same people like Frank Lowenstein, who is a special envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations under Obama, saying Netanyahu has no loyalty to Biden and will be focused entirely on currying favor with Trump. And adding, Trump won't hesitate to act like he's already president when he sees an opportunity. And actually, to that point, when Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs visited the United States this weekend, he stopped at Mar-a-Lago before visiting the White House. And this, as of course we've talked about, Trump has appointed some hardline pro-Israel folks to his cabinet, as well as now having picked Mike Huckabee, a longtime supporter of illegal West Bank settlements, for ambassador. And finally here, we saw Netanyahu himself reportedly already speaking to Trump at least 3 times, with him saying that the two saw major opportunities ahead for Israel, especially in advancing peace. So of course, on the note of peace, you have people wondering, what really is going to happen from here? Because again, everything is still playing out, and yesterday, Israel reportedly targeted a densely populated tent encampment in an area designated as a humanitarian zone. And this, as Netanyahu has been accused by his critics of extending this war for 1, political gain, and 2, to stay out of jail. Right? Because while also being blamed by some for the security failures on October 7th, Bibi's also facing criminal charges. And in fact, his trial started back in 2020, and since then, the court has made its way through a list of more than 300 witnesses. But also with that, Netanyahu so far has avoided to take the stand, with the court once accepting his argument that he's just too busy to prepare a defense while the country is at war. But notably now, an Israeli court has rejected his request to delay his testimony again, saying that he must take the stand next month. And this is specifically Netanyahu is charged with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 separate but connected cases. Now with that, important to note, he has denied everything, with him and his supporters suggesting that it's political persecution, alleging that it's some sort of conspiracy to remove him from power. And this also notably, as under Israeli law, he is not actually required to step down from office unless he is convicted, and then also that conviction is upheld through an appeals process. So seemingly, no matter which way this goes, there's a lot more runway for him. But that, my friends, is the end of your Thursday evening, Friday morning dive into the news. Thank you for being a part of whatever the hell this week has been so far, and I look forward to seeing you right back here on Monday. I don't know about you, I've been chronically online, and maybe in the meantime do like what I'm gonna do and try and disconnect from the world for a little bit, come up for air. Because don't worry, the worlds will be there waiting for you. Love you, faces. See you Monday.
I don't know what that is. Oh, yeah, we do not want that. No. The Kids Horror Spiral. Oh, okay, let's see.
Is it just me, or is the internet looking weirder than usual lately? I mean, the internet has always been weird, but this feels different. It's almost like kid stuff is taking over or something. Like you can't escape it no matter where you go. If there's any place you can see this happening clearly, it's horror. Horror is like a petri dish for this phenomenon. You can watch in real time as kids assimilate new ideas within the genre, warp them, and then spread them back out to the rest of the world. The backrooms were ruined by thousands of kids coming up with new monsters and new floors for them. If not for the SCP Wiki's careful review process, it would, by now, almost definitely be drowning in submissions from kids. Remember what kids did to creepypasta? In fact, there's an entire horror subgenre that's basically come to be defined by this interaction: mascot horror. We all know Five Nights at Freddy's. How could you not? Poppy Playtime, Bendy and the Ink Machine. It's all sort of uniquely positioned to look like it's for kids right from the start. And the more kids flock to it, the more tailor-made it appears to be for exactly that outcome. The more intentionally approachable it becomes to children, the stranger it becomes to everyone else. To me, this doesn't just look like kids taking an idea and making it weird. It looks like a spiral, descending down into a core of absurdity and insularity that you can only understand if you're already in the middle of it. And I have to wonder, where does it end? Sometimes the search for truth leads us down dark paths. I don't think anything I've studied for this show could ever prepare me for what I now need to talk about. I suppose if we really want to understand this weird relationship between kids and their media, there's no better place to start than Skibidi Toilet. I know
Hey,
it's kind of
skibbity
a tired thing to say at this point. Every newscaster and their geriatric cat has offered some kind of commentary on how perplexing and strange Skibidi Toilet is. And it is weird. I never thought Gmod YouTube poop would be serialized into a culture-defining phenomenon, but here we are. The confusion is understandable. That reaction is also, in a way, more interesting than Skibidi Toilet itself. As an adult looking at something like this, what do you make of it? The term I see applied a lot here is brain rot. It's not just that kids are consuming low-quality or poor-taste media now, it's that there's something wrong with it. It's making them dumber, making the world worse. At least adults know when they're looking at brain rot. An adult would have gotten the initial joke in Skibidi Toilet and moved on. Kids really don't seem to. They have a different way of understanding the world, which makes them especially vulnerable to it. And, okay, maybe Skibidi Toilet is a little silly to worry about in particular, but what if you apply all that same logic to something a little darker?
Okay.
I mentioned Poppy Playtime earlier. You may have heard of it. It's one of the most polished examples of a mascot horror game, kind of a flagship title. One of the monsters in the game, Huggy Wuggy, proved especially popular with kids, much to the concern of their parents. In 2022, horrified parents and teachers across multiple countries accused Poppy Playtime of corrupting their children. News outlets reported that kids would play a game where they hugged each other, whispering a sinister song Huggy Wuggy had taught them. The head of one British primary school called...
I'm sorry, if a child came up to me and hugged me and said those words, I would laugh. Oh my god. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at this, because that's hilarious. My name's Huggy Wuggy. Sharp teeth leave you bloody. Don't ever call me ugly. Hug me till you die. That, I think that if a child came up to me and hugged me, like if my baby came up to me and hugged me and said all that, I think I would just keep hugging them. Like, not out of fear, but like, that's cute. Like, the implications of that, pretty morbid. Still very cute though.
Very deceiving character, as hugs should be seen as something kind and loving.
Yeah.
Except, Huggy Wuggy doesn't even sing in Poppy Playtime. That song the kids were whispering, that was Free Hugs, a fan creation by YouTuber Tryhard Ninja. Turns out the panic over Poppy Playtime was about something that isn't even in the game. It's easy to assume that this whole situation is all just more of the same, parents responding to what they identified as brain rot, albeit of a darker variety. As a flagship piece of mascot horror, Poppy Playtime fits right in with content like Skibidi Toilet and all those weird Roblox kids games. I can see why anxious adults might naturally assume that kids were, once again, just mindlessly absorbing what the internet was feeding them. But regardless of where it came from, kids singing about murder is still pretty scary, right? There has to be something going on there. They're pretending to kill each other on the playground. No wonder their parents were upset. Actually, come to think of it, this is sort of familiar, isn't it? Haven't parents always kind of been anxious about this stuff? I'm thinking of the satanic panic of the 80s, the scare over comic books and rock music of the 50s. Even in the Victorian era, there was a concern that penny dreadfuls would lead children to a life of crime. The fact that adults have always worried about this kind of thing sort of also implies that kids have always done it, right? Before Poppy Playtime, kids were teaching each other songs about murdering Barney the dinosaur. And before that, they were summoning Bloody Mary and playing with Ouija boards. In fact, they're still doing all of that stuff to this very day. Now, kids who have never even seen Barney still pass down songs about killing him. It comes to them through other kids, classmates, siblings, friends. If they transfer schools, the stories, rhymes, and games come with them. And while kids have been trying to summon Bloody Mary for decades, no two rituals are the same. Nor are the stories about who Bloody Mary is or what she even does once you summon her. It almost sounds like folklore, doesn't it? I know when you think of folklore, it's easy to think of the old stuff. Ancient legends, mythology, campfire tales, famous cryptids like Bigfoot or Nessie, sacred rituals passed down across generations. All of those things are folklore, but folklore is modern, too. It's created every day, all the time, by everyone, even children. There's a word for this, actually. Childlore, a unique branch of anthropology dedicated to folklore created by kids. And it's more than just ghost stories and creepy rhymes. If you played hand-clapping games as a kid, if you traded trinkets like Pogs or Silly Bands or Crazy Bones, if you and your friends pretended to be dragons or superheroes at recess, you were participating in folklore. According to media scholar Henry Jenkins, kids differ a little in their approach, though. They tend to create their folklore through a process that he calls poaching. They take something they're familiar with, like their favorite game or show, and adapt it into child lore by subverting it in some way. That's how you get Jingle Bells Batman Smells, creepypastas about Sonic the Hedgehog, kids pretending to be Huggy Wuggy. It's also how you get Skibbity Riz, Stanley Cups as a status symbol, weird infected My Little Pony OCs. For adults, this is all just brain rot.
Yeah.
For kids, it's culture. A way for them to mature, form friendships, learn about the world on their own terms, from a frame of reference that they understand. Playing pretend lets them develop their imaginations. Spooky games help them face their fears in a fun, safe way. Even
I feel that.
songs about killing cartoon characters are a way to prove that they're growing up by challenging what adults think kids should be. Whether something is brain rot is really just a matter of perspective. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Kids and adults are bound to see things differently. And hey, sometimes child lore can get out of hand. Remember the Devious Licks thing a few years back, where kids were just destroying things and vandalizing their schools for views? Remember the Slender Man stabbing in 2014? It was too...
Yes. Yes. That was one of the first instances in a society where it was like, oh no, this is not only staying, it's going to corrupt the children. But this is where the future is right now. Those kids are out of prison now.
Girls who stabbed a classmate, hoping to summon Slender Man. Expensive skincare products have become a mark of popularity for some kids who are fed impossible beauty standards from TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
The call of the coveted influencer lifestyle is never far away. I think the internet is just kind of a big place. Maybe a little too accessible in some ways. And there aren't really very many spaces dedicated to kids anymore. Gone are the days of Neopets, Webkins, and Club Penguin.
Yes.
Kids are going to run across things they don't understand, and they're going to poach it. Whether that gets out of hand is less a matter of the internet rotting children's brains, and I think more a matter of supervision. Adults do have a responsibility to help kids navigate this complex space more safely, while also allowing them the freedom to explore the culture of being a kid. As an adult, you can tell the difference between a skibbity toilet and a vandalism fad. Kids literally cannot. They lack the experience. That part is actually pretty simple to me. What I find really weird is when the opposite happens. When adults poach child lore back. You may have heard of a little channel called Game Theory. Back in 2014, it sort of set a precedent by reading a little too much into the game Five Nights at Freddy's. Very quickly after this, for both the YouTubers and the kids watching at home, theory crafting became perhaps the primary way to engage with this game and its forthcoming sequels. In fact, immediately in the second installment, you can already see the impact of this, the game's leaning into the idea of hidden and fragmented lore. Now there are countless spin-offs, books, merchandise, even a movie, all feeding together into this Byzantine body of lore that is Five Nights at Freddy's, which also makes it the perfect poaching ground for kids. This is a franchise that has actively encouraged narrative diffusion, that wants you to take pieces of it and run away with.
Oh my god. I have to watch this. I have to watch this because I saw something about it and I was like, wait, are they really gonna tell her not to?
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those in favour will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. We're in the middle of a vote.
Mr. Speaker, I call that a personal vote.
No, sit down. We're in the middle of a vote. The ayes have it. First, a party vote's been called for.
Mr. Speaker,
A party vote has been called for. There's a process here.
New Zealand National,
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour,
34 votes opposed.
Green Party of Aotearoa New Zealand,
15 votes opposed.
ACT New Zealand,
11 votes in favour.
New Zealand First,
8 votes in favour.
Te Pāti Māori,
E ono ngā pōti e whakahe.
No, don't do that.
That's what they think about your dumbass process. That was dumb. They didn't even fucking show it.
E ono ngā pōti e whakahe.
No, don't do that.
Yes.
The House is suspended until the ringing of the bells. The gallery is to be cleared.
Nah, bro. That said, fuck you in your process. Fuck you when you're trying to undermine their actual rights. Ugh. Oh, that made me cry. The world is crazy right now. And that was such an amazing way of saying you're not gonna take my rights away for our people and for us and the allies that were also in parliament in that entire half, basically, that stood up with them and did the haka with them if they knew. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. People need to be able to stand up for each other. It's a terrible world, and they did their best. And Australia better fucking listen. They better listen. And I love that the woman that was next to her was smiling so proudly because she knew that the country was gonna be in a good spot, at least for a little bit, in standing up for the people that have been there and lived there before the colonizers. Okay. Wait, where did the here it is. Okay, we'll watch a little Wise
After all,
Disciple.
has been seen often as the Protestant apostle, but here he is apparently affirming pagan symbols, quoting pagan poets and philosophers.
Is that the typical formula for evangelism that we tend to use today? No. Christians have argued for Paul's speech and how that informs our own methods of evangelism. I'm convinced that we can do what he did today with our own circles of influence. Amen? We're not invading someone else's story with the gospel. No, we're simply showing people that their story already fits into the gospel. What really happened with Paul at the Areopagus in Acts chapter 17? Was it what we've been taught or something else entirely? N.T. Wright made a video recently where he explored what's really going on in this famous passage of the New Testament. But is he onto something or not? So let's do this. Let's take a look at his comments and see if they line up with Scripture. To be clear, I'm convinced that there is something that we're all missing about Paul's speech in Acts 17. So whether Wright points it out or not, I'm going to share with you what I think is going on as well. So buckle up. We're about to go deep into the Scripture. But first, welcome back to Wise Disciple. My name is Nate, and I'm helping you become the effective Christian that you were meant to be. That means understanding how to share the gospel in unique circumstances, like the Apostle Paul did in Athens. Make sure to like, sub, and share this one around, but only if it blesses you. Amen?
Amen.
With the pagan non-Judean world, some shared assumptions on which he can build a gospel presentation. Paul, after all, has been seen often as the Protestant apostle, saying no to everything remotely pagan and wanting simply to give a message of salvation through the cross of Jesus, a message which enables you to escape the wicked world altogether. But here he is apparently affirming pagan symbols, quoting pagan poets and philosophers. And when he does get round to Jesus, he speaks not of the cross, but only of the resurrection.
So Paul's speech at the Areopagus is absolutely fascinating to me. I've wrestled with this speech for years before I finally preached on it myself, and many Christians will point this out, which is a fact. Paul does not present the typical evangelistic formula that we are all used to, particularly today in the 21st century. So he doesn't do Romans Road, he doesn't do Way of the Master, right? He does something else that's unique for that moment in front of the Athenians. Although I would argue this is not outside of the broader approach that Paul advocates for. He does something unique. So before we go any further, just so we're clear, and you got it in your mind, let's take a look at Acts 17. Now, this speech doesn't happen out of nowhere, okay? It is brought about because of something that happens back in verse 16. Now, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogues with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Okay, stop. Notice, Paul does two things here. And apparently these are both part of his regular routine. He goes to synagogue on the Sabbath, and he reasons with the Jews and the devout persons, or the God-fearers, right? And he does so by using the Tanakh, presumably, that Jesus is their Messiah, but he also goes to what my translation calls the marketplace. What's that, Nate? Thanks for asking. The marketplace was this area called the Agora. Okay, now, just about all of the Greek cities had one of these. This was an open area near the city gates that acted like a town hall or a public square type of arena where a lot of business was conducted. But also people would go down there to seek work, and they would also engage each other in important discussions. And primarily, they would discuss philosophical and political issues, but they would also allow for religious discussion. And that's where Paul comes in. Paul sees this space as an opportunity to talk about Jesus. To me, the present-day town hall that exists for us is YouTube. I see important parallels here. But anyway,
that's good.
Paul
That's
makes
good.
it a practice to go to these places, and then this happens. Verse 18. Some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers
That's a good way of,
also
I mean,
conversed with him.
it could also be Twitter, it could also be like Facebook, it could also be Instagram, but wherever people have discourse is where it belongs.
And some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. They took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting, for you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. Now, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. Okay, that's a very revealing statement by Luke. And I think it would be important to come back to this at some point, because it tells us something about the nature of the Athenians. I think Paul recognized this about them. So I don't think Luke is the only one who noticed this and sort of included it in his writings. I think Paul zoomed in on this quality also, and he let it shape his comments at the Areopagus. So again, it's very important that we understand who these people were. Apparently, they were folks who spent their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new. Today, we would call these people information junkies, right? Verse 22. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and everything in it. Being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. Okay, that is the first time that we see a typical component of everyday evangelism. In about, 9 verses, Paul mentions repentance finally, right? Verse 31, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, and of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. Okay, and now we see the resurrection of Jesus finally mentioned as well. Is that the typical formula for evangelism that we tend to use today? No. Right? This is what N.T. Wright is pointing out in his video. So let's go back to his comments.
Some have therefore concluded that this speech represents something Luke wants to do or say, but without much historical reference to Paul himself. And some have seen this speech rather as an essay in natural theology, in which one might begin with symbols in the culture, rather than with scripture or with Jesus, and try to fit the gospel into that culture, rather than have the gospel address the culture with a fresh word. And that has been contentious, partly because it's not at all clear that that is what Paul is doing, and partly because that approach to theology is itself highly controversial.
And that's true. Christians have argued over Paul's speech and how that informs our own methods of evangelism today. So, for example, you'll have on one side of the fence Reformed presuppositionalist types, right? And then on the other side of the fence, you'll have, what would you say, classical or evidentialist types. And they'll both be looking at Paul and try to argue that his speech reinforces their own method of engaging non-believers.
So while some have said that all this represents Luke, not Paul, others have suggested that perhaps Paul tried a bit of natural theology and the resurrection at Athens, and obviously it didn't work. So when he went to Corinth, he took a radically different line. And as he says in 1 Corinthians 2, I determined to know nothing in my dealings with you except Jesus the Messiah, especially his crucifixion. Result, lo and behold, Paul stayed in Corinth much longer and established a thriving church. That's kind of an easy, superficial reading.
In other words, Paul tried an approach at the Areopagus that he ultimately disagreed with later, and then he shifted tactics by the time that he got to Corinth. All right, so that's one view of Paul by looking at Acts 17 and other places. I don't think that's the case, and I don't think Wright believes that either.
Let's knock that suggestion on the head before we go on. When Paul actually summarizes his gospel in 1 Corinthians 15, he stresses the whole thing, the Messiah, his death, his burial, and particularly his resurrection. There is no either-or between Calvary and Easter, either evangelistically or theologically. And we must note, as we were discussing in a previous session, that a good deal of Acts, including the important early speeches, likewise focuses on the resurrection, with only brief statements about the cross. So this speech isn't actually out of line, in that respect at least. One more serious misconception to put aside as we begin. Many people have supposed that the Areopagus was a kind of philosophical debating society. Luke has just mentioned in verse 18 that Paul had been arguing with the Stoics and Epicureans in the marketplace, and it's been assumed that this address is Paul's attempt to put his own position in that debate. Well, there are indeed philosophical arguments going to and fro here, as we shall see, but the Areopagus wasn't a debating society. It was a law court. It was the highest court in Athens, composed of leading citizens, founded according to legend jointly by the god Apollo and by Athens' own tutelary deity, the goddess Athene.
Okay, I'm glad he pointed this out. Like I said, I've preached on Acts 17, and, well, just as an aside,
I'm actually, also just as an aside, from his aside, is I've never actually read Acts 17, so I'm not sure which one he's talking about, and I understand that it's Paul talking to people, bringing them some new stuff, and they're like, can you, like, tell us what that means? And,
a preacher, as a preacher, you have to make certain decisions of, like, what to leave in and what to leave out, so that the thrust of the message that you're bringing to the fore takes precedence for the congregation, okay? So I've never had a chance to talk about this before, but I'm happy to now. Wright's correct. A lot of people believe that the Areopagus was just another marketplace, you know? It was another agora where people would come and engage philosophical and religious ideas. But wait a second, they already had that space. It was the agora, right? No, the Areopagus was probably more like a court. And Paul was brought there not because of guilt or charges that they were bringing against him, but because this was meant to be an open inquiry. Think of something like the Senate or congressional hearings where people are subpoenaed to come and answer questions. This was probably what Paul was facing. Look closer at his specific address to the court in verse 22. Paul says this, men of Athens, and then he goes on, right? Men of Athens, people of Athens, right? Paul is addressing this court, which represents the city and its culture. But the question is, why? Why was he invited there? You know, well, the clues are back in verse 16 and 18. Okay, take a look at this. While Paul was waiting, his spirit was provoked within him. Why? Because he saw that the city was full of idols. Now, some of the philosophers, they were talking to him, and they were saying things because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. Paul's problem is idolatry. And that's what he's seeing in this city. So what do you think he's saying at the Agora to the philosophers? Right? Think about that. whatever he's saying, it's something about their idolatry, right? I think what he was saying at the Agora tracks along what he says at the Areopagus. I think his speech at the Areopagus is essentially whatever it was that he was saying in the marketplace. So we can just, put these pieces together now. But Paul was telling the Athenians that their gods were illegitimate. And it caught the attention of the city, which then led to his standing before the Areopagus court. Now, it wasn't illegal at the time to look at what's happening and question the legitimacy of the Greek gods, okay? But it was still socially unacceptable to do, right? We have to remember, Athens has a checkered past with this kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, there was another man from Athens several hundred years prior to Paul who also questioned the religious tradition, who also questioned the gods, but he was killed for it. His name was Socrates. Socrates was put on trial for going to the Agora, where Paul eventually went, and Socrates was condemned to death for allegedly corrupting the youth and denying the existence of certain gods, and even positing the existence of new gods or something, right? Now, fast forward hundreds of years, and here comes Paul essentially doing something very similar in the same place. The Athenians want to know what the heck is going on. So, anyway, it's a little bit of history there. And I just think it helps to bring in the proper perspective when thinking about Paul's speech here.
Its name means hill or rock of Ares, Ares being the Greek version of the Roman god of war, Mars.
Yeah.
Hence the frequent translation, Mars Hill. The craggy hill in question is a mile or so to the west of the Acropolis, which is the largest hill in the city centre, on which to this day you see Athene's great temple, the Parthenon, and sundry other temples and other buildings. There are debates as to whether in Paul's day the court actually met on Mars Hill or somewhere closer to the middle of town, but the point is that it was indeed a court, not a discussion group. The court in question, the Areopagus, had been set up initially to try the most serious cases, including capital ones. Its first defendant was the legendary Orestes, who was on trial for avenging his father Agamemnon by killing his mother Clytemnestra. The point here, anyway, is that Paul is being put on trial. So when in verse 19, Luke's...
Well, now, that's disputed, actually. So, others would disagree with Wright and point out that this was more of an informal inquiry, right? Potentially, depending on how Paul performed, that could have led to more serious charges, but at the time of the speech, this was nothing too serious. And I actually agree. I think that view is correct. I don't agree with Wright.
Says that they took him up to the Areopagus. The Greek word epilambano means to seize or arrest. It certainly wasn't about Paul being invited to give a learned paper at next week's seminar.
That's a funny line. Again, it depends on what these words mean in their context, okay? But notice, what does not happen, as far as Luke records, is a formal charge of any kind. And after Paul gives his speech, he leaves, apparently of his own free will. So was this an arrest? That seems more harsh of a term. That's why earlier I was using the word subpoena as a kind of analogy or illustration or whatever. I think that's closer to what happened to Paul. Having said that, I could be wrong about that, so, take what I say with a grain of salt. It's fascinating to ponder.
I need to look up... I'm gonna need to look up this guy. I don't really have a lot of time left. I have a few minutes. So let's do... What should we do, you guys? Let's put that here. Yay! Hold on. There it is. Okay, I wasn't sure which camera it was. a little every time I live stream, I get a little better. Today I'm live streaming from YouTube and Kick. Now I'm gonna go to get ready to go to church. Hopefully I could be back later. If not, that's okay. Got a lot done. Would love to do more, but in actuality, there's only so much that I can do before the ADHD kicks in and I can't do anything. So have a good morning, have a good afternoon, have a good night, and I'll see you guys next time.